campaign against human rights abuses. Inevitably, they believe the legitimate or legitimation of torture by the world's leading democracy would provide a welcome justification for its more widespread use in other parts of the world. The argument against any use of torture would derive from the utilitarian argument, which considers the implications of establishing a precedent that would eventually be extended beyond its limited case justifiable. So this is then, the utilitarian argument becomes something called the morality by numbers. Okay? The problem is, what's the calculus in that? The calculus is always the problem with utilitarianism. So this is about 10 years ago. I was asked, any of you guys go to Peace Week? I happened to go to Peace Week one time. I mentioned something in their meeting, and they said, well, we want you to give a talk. So I went into this room, and I don't know, there was 100 people or so, whatever. And I was talking about deontological ethics. And that example I give you guys about going into the water in the beach and saving a child and yada, yada, yada. And I got to the end of it, and I said to the group, I said, the whole reason for this, I asked my class one day, I said, how many of you are okay with torture? And I said, every one of them raised their hand. And I thought, do you really understand the nature of torture? And I began to explain the consequences in a democratic and libertarian society. And one of the ladies in the group raised her hand. She says, did you have anybody in the towers on 9/11? And I said, no, my brother didn't go to work that day. He was working out on Long Island, but he worked down in the Bowery where the towers are. And then I said, but I did have people who went to Vietnam and never came home. And the gist of her argument was, it's a legitimate argument, that the 3,000 lives lost at the towers should be the ones to decide if we should use torture or not to save future people. And I said, well, that's morality by the numbers. I didn't say that, but I'm thinking about it. And then I read Dershowitz, and I realized he's got the same argument about it. We're a nation of 330 million people. 3,000 people suffered great loss that day. Should those people decide for the other 330 million of us if we should use torture? And if we say yes, then the next question is, so what if there were 300 lives lost? Or what if there are 30 lives lost? Or what if there were 30,000 lives lost? Or what if there were 300,000 lives? How do you figure out the mechanism that opens the door to a method that could well save lives and perhaps couldn't save lives? Is it worth the risk to be wrong in order to save lives? And if we do save lives, then that one innocent life, maybe it really doesn't matter anyway. And the problem with that, always in the utilitarian argument, is what's the calculus? How do you decide? Everybody understand what I'm saying to you? So you have two of them. The morality on high ground is what's the calculus to justify utilitarianism. The problem with the moral high ground is, you're going to sacrifice people to figure out if someone is really dangerous out there? We know people are dangerous out there. This goes back to the preemptive war that we talked about at the end of the lecture on Monday. For Dershowitz, then, the slippery slope is an argument of caution, not a debate stopper. Now, this is the brilliance of a legal mind. Since virtually every compromise with an absolute approach to right carries the risk of slipping further. Therefore, he says, an appropriate response to the slippery slope is to build in a principle break. A principle break means a way to examine what's going on. We don't assume anything. If we're going to go ahead and do this, let's do this in steps. Okay, this step is satisfied. This step is satisfied. I don't know if we satisfied this step yet. Once we satisfy, and we can make the progression into torture. And then we go at different levels of torture until we think we've got the information that we're looking for. So he says there are 4 ways to use torture. Only one of these, he says, satisfies the need for a principle break. Allow the security services to continue to fight terrorism in a twilight zone which is outside the realm of law. Now, as far as we know so far, we're still under the law of the FISA Commission. We may be outside the realm. The way of the hypocrites, they declare that they abide by the rule of law but turn a blind eye to what goes on beneath the surface. The truthful road to the rule of law is that the law itself must ensure a proper framework for the activity of the security services in seeking to prevent terrorist acts, or to forego any use of torture and simply allow the preventable terrorist act to occur. So he's going to line up right here. This is the principle break that he's going to use. We have to have a legal system that's open to understanding by the general population what we're doing. Everybody with me on that? Okay. The real issue, therefore, is not whether such work would or would not be used. It would. The question is whether it would be done openly pursuant to a previously established legal procedure or whether it would be done secretly in violation of all and any existing laws. And then he talks about the several values that we already talked about: safety, security of the nation, et cetera, et cetera. Open accountability and visibility in democracy. Citizens cannot approve or disapprove of government actions of which they're unaware. So the best intentions, he said, have to be followed with the best actions. You can't just say something and not follow it up. Everybody with me on that so far? So he's going to present an interesting argument. If we have a homegrown terrorist, of course, we're dealing with a citizen. He says if we have a homegrown, and they know that if they have information that doesn't assist us in stopping the act of terror, they're going to be accessory to murder. Then that would be the death penalty. He said, so maybe the first level is amnesty. Okay, you can't be charged with a crime, but you have to tell us what's going on. And we do that all the time. We give people a free pass if they give us the information that we want to know. And this is egregious information, innocent people, hundreds of thousands, maybe with the dirty bomb. Okay, now, you don't give us the information we want. So we gave you a chance to be free of any kind of penal outcome. And we talked about the aims of, the aims of punishment. There has to be painful, harmful, or somehow uncomfortable. Okay, so we gave you the out. You didn't take the out. Now we can up the ante. And this is where he starts going through this then. So we have different techniques, some that are non-physical, non-invasive, that we begin to work with. If you're caught drunk driving, we can, if you don't blow, we can take your blood out. We can invade your body with needles. So if we can invade your body and extract fluid, we can put fluid in. We've given you the out, and you don't want to. And that's where things like truth serum come in. And if that doesn't work, we continue to raise the ante until we feel like we have gotten the information, if we can get it out of you, at whatever level of torture is required. But we do it openly. We have a system to follow, checks and balances that go through the whole thing. Everybody follow his argument there? It's a reasonable argument. We're trying to prevent harm to someone who's trying to do harm to us. So you give them amnesty first, the Fifth Amendment. You give them a pass. Okay, you don't have to incriminate yourself without a benefit. We'll give you the benefit. And if you don't take it, then we're just going to up the ante, because the state's right and necessity to preserve the population is always first. Especially against the terrorist act, where we're not involved in combat with them. It's not like I'm risking my life and I'm taking a gun up, and if I kill you, I kill you. If you kill me, you kill me. What do you do with the non-citizen? Well, here he goes back to the moral high ground argument. If we're going to be, in a sense, citizens of the world and hold the world accountable to the highest standards of morality, then we have to practice what we preach. We can still give them amnesty. We can go through the lesser invasive procedures until we exhaust them, and then we go to the next level, whatever it takes. Does his argument have any legs? To do it openly. Now, it doesn't mean necessarily you don't give names up of people who are doing this and that. I mean, people have to operate within a certain sphere of protection. I'm talking about torturers now, people who are doing the acts of it. But does it make sense? Let's ask this question first. Does it make sense that we should have a legal system, a legal framework that controls it rather than let it happen under the, okay. And should it be something that we have a step procedure so you can only go so far as you go so far as you go so far as you go so far? Well, I have a question about that. Out in the field, we have something called rules of engagement. So these days what happens is, and what's happened has been reported often enough, I think this is accurate. You'll be out, let's say, in Afghanistan, and you have a high-value target in your gun sight, and you have to call Washington to get permission to shoot them, to kill them. And if Washington says no, then your hands are tied. To people out in the field, that's a very unreasonable kind of thing to do. You're sent out there to get a high-value target, and you have one, but you have to get permission to kill them. Well, what if we have a terrorist, and we have a high-value terrorist, and we go through the step procedure, and the people who regulate the step procedure say, well, no, we're uncomfortable with you doing that, and then the bomb goes off, and you see what I mean? You can build into the step procedure the same restraint that we have out in the field, and I don't know that that is a legitimate argument for not accomplishing, quote-unquote, the mission. But we build these step procedures in there to make sure no one goes over the line, no one goes rogue out there and does something that we haven't authorized in our name. So does the step procedure make sense? It has its downside, doesn't it? Why use it if it has a downside? If it's not going to accomplish the goal of saving lives.
Because then you end up with Guantanamo Bay.
Here's your hand. Okay, good. Rachel. Say again?
It's better benefits than downsides.
I can't hear you still.
It has better benefits than downsides.
Well, I think that's a reasonable argument to make, absolutely. Absolutely. At least we minimize the possibility of error. But if you're wrong, you might end up having to bury 100,000 people too. Go ahead.
On the argument of it being immoral and like causing downfall, so like what is morality? Things I was just gonna ask, like how public would that torture be? Like would we know about it, or would the government like mask that?
It's a great question.
Like, 'cause I feel like it shouldn't be public, but
Nobody knows a lot of things.
I mean yes, but saying like would it be?
Remember we talked about capital punishment? Should we go back to public executions? You think that might deter a few people? The answer is no. Well, seems to be no. People who are dedicated to want to kill someone are going to kill somebody regardless. They don't care about the death penalty anyway. Why would a public execution make any difference to them? Go ahead.
I also think it's easy to say, oh, we can torture them. Or I'm not saying like I'm for or against, because I'm still kind of, I don't know enough about the topic. But I'm saying like it's so easy to say, yeah, just torture them, or yeah, let's go to war with this country. And it's easy from this standpoint because we're not doing anything, we're just sitting here. But like when you're actually in the situation, it's a little tougher than it seems.
Sure. It raises another question too, as a society. What does it say about us as a people if we openly embrace torture? Right now we have some, did I talk about rendition in here on Monday? Rendition is a term that we use when we'd prefer to have someone else do the work for us. We send them to, there are countries out there that are quite astute at, I don't know if I should mention them or not, anyway. There's some out there that are very astute at doing it. One of the techniques is to hang somebody upside down, which gives you a headache after about half an hour. 6-foot stick, about 1 inch wide and about maybe, a half-inch thick, and just the bottom of the feet, just like this, not hard or anything, just hanging upside down, all the blood leaving your lower extremities and going to your head. And goes on and on and on, and then they're done. And they take you down and put you back. You carry you to your cell. Your feet are swollen. You're not going anywhere. And the next day we just go through the same thing. And after 2 or 3 days, your feet crack and bleed, and you're not going anywhere. You're not going to be walking. If any of you go anywhere, you're going to be on your hands and knees, and you're probably buck naked. And you're going to, and sooner or later, you're going to maybe be convinced that it's worthwhile saying something, even if you have nothing to say, because you just want the pain to go away. Now, because we have rendition, it kind of removes it from us. It's kind of like executions. It's removed from us. If we had public executions, now it's not removed from us. Now we have to deal with that reality, face to face. If we rendition people to other countries and they do the, well, I mean, you all didn't even know that until I shared that with you. And they're very good at it. And if there is information to be extracted, they get the information.
Well, we don't even know so many. There's so many forms of torture we don't even.
Yeah, they're sure.